Where do you want me to start?
Well, you're in New York.
Okay.
You're driving a cab.
Okay, that
and then
part.
you can give us a flashback. You were an actor, and you can talk about that.
Okay. All right.
So acting, cab driving, and if anything cool or unusual or weird happened in the cab.
Well, I got a few of those.
Yeah, that would be
okay.
That would be a good place, a good thing.
Okay. Well, I'm starting my story somewhere in the middle. In brief, coming out of college, I had my sights set for Broadway and went to New York, and I had some mild success. I did end up on the Broadway stage, not as I had anticipated. I ended up in the Buff. I did a show called RH Alcott, and at the time when I did it, it was a revival. And it was at that point, 10 years after it had initially opened, was now a period piece. It was quite something. And really the only people who came to see the show were tourists. And there are two things I wanted to share first as an actor, but even more important as a human being, that I learned from doing that show. And that is, and it may seem rather obvious, but there's a depth to it, and hopefully I can translate that through the lens here, in how we hide behind clothes. That it isn't just putting on a certain outfit that makes us feel good for the day. When I did the show and learned, obviously, to be able to take my clothes off and just be comfortable with that. But I really learned how we hide behind our facade, and that translates also to, frankly, a persona that we also layer in with what we wear. That's number one. Number two was that after I did the show, I did it for 2.5 years, it got to a point where I forgot that I was naked. And people would come backstage to visit one of the other cast members, and I would walk to the door and answer it in the Buff, and never think anything about it. And I'd say, oh yeah, come on backstage, they're right over here. And so there is a sense of really becoming comfortable with who you are. And now I understood why there are the nudist colonies. I mean, there's some other reasons too for it, but I won't go into that right now unless you want the salty aspect of it. But
you can get salty.
There's a sense of...
Are you the only naked guy in the show? Or?
No, we're all naked.
Everybody's naked.
We're all naked. No, I frankly was working with a lot of women in the show, and we were always professional, but...
Always?
Always. I'll let that sort of fade. So the aspect that I'm sharing is how much that once you do get comfortable, that you don't need that facade. And there were all sorts of body types in the show. And frankly, when I did go to a nudist colony, boy, you would see considerably different body types there. And that sense of wanting to just really commune as yourself with nature, of course, and with others. So anyway, that was my experience, one of my experiences on Broadway. I did some other shows on tour, but to stay with New York. So I did that. I also started a pottery shop business with, at that time, my wife. The pottery shop is still going to this day, called Mud, Sweat and Tears on 46th Street and 10th Avenue. At some point, after we opened the business, my marriage ended, and then a few years after that, I turned the business over to her, and then I left New York. But before I leave New York, I'm now going to go back and share my, after I did O Calcutta, then I needed to get a permanent job, so to speak. So I got into the cab industry while we were getting the pottery shop going. And after a while, I did the cabbing. I decided to go back to my career. In horror of horrors, from the point of, say, 17 to now mid-30s, my whole vision, my whole goal, which I had finally grasped hold of was to be an actor in New York. But at this point, I had this epiphany that I no longer had that tough exterior to take all the rejection that you have to take if you want to be an actor. And I went, oh my God, who am I and what am I going to do? So that started a whole internal journey for me, which that's another whole story in terms of my realizing that I was a boy in a man's body and that I needed to grow up. In there was where the end of my marriage came, that I realized I was not ready for this. And so I, as gentle as I could, we ended the marriage, and I went on my internal journey, which took me 10 years, and another time I'd like to share with you that. So now I couldn't go back to acting, so I went back to what I had just been doing relatively recent, which was cabbing. And in there I drove a cab for about 10 years. And
in New York, 10 years?
In New York.
So now you were there from being an actor and then the pottery shop. This is like a 15-year period. You started as a teenager, now you're in your mid-30s.
Yep. And I'm going to my mid-40s or even later. About mid-40s.
So you were in the city for a while.
20 years.
20 years in New York City.
Oh, as I say it, I did New York and New York did me.
Where did you live?
I lived with, at that time, my girlfriend, who ended up being my wife, at the Broadmoor Hotel on 102nd and Broadway. Then we got married, and then we moved downtown to an actor's tower called Manhattan Plaza, where it was filled with actors.
What period of time was this?
Oh,
70s, 80s?
No, it's later than that. It's 80s to 90s, I guess. 80s.
So what's going on in New York at that period of time?
Oh man, now you're asking. I can remember.
Generally speaking,
there would have been
Who's the man?
Phantom of the Opera, Cats. That's all I can remember right offhand.
So now you're separated, you're divorced.
So with having started the pottery shop and then realizing that I was not really ready for the marriage, which had been going for about 10 years.
Children?
No children. And so then I moved out with a friend to Brooklyn and rented a room from him for a few years. And then I ended up buying a co-op in Flatbush in Brooklyn, which I still have. And
still have it?
I still have it, yeah. I'm in the process of helping get the co-op up, ready for selling many of the apartments, including my own. So anyway, to the cab driving aspect, I honed it to an art form. I ended up only driving 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and this was all masterminded for a purpose. It ended up backfiring, but the purpose was I needed to balance my life, and that I work within 3 days, I'd work over a 40-hour work week in 3 days. And then I'd have I'd have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday off. I had a 4-day weekend every week. And I said, man. And to balance it, I said, I got to get out of the city. And I started to get into hiking and backpacking, doing a lot of this on my own. And both, it ended up being it's all good if you learn from the experience. And what I learned from it was it didn't balance my living in New York City. It showed the absurdity of it. And that I ultimately had to get the hell out of there. So, and what helped promote, after having this realization, I got robbed a few times in my cab. One was at gunpoint. Actually, 3 times. You forget these things. One was at gunpoint. Another time, the guy came around and grabbed me by the neck from the back.